Good morning. How's everybody doing? We are in week 2 as we're looking at a warrior's heart. Last week, I just kind of want to take you down a journey real quick of where we were. We talked about David and Goliath. And the main thing that we talked about David and Goliath was that as David went through everything that he went through, he had to know that God was behind him. We talked about how as David was kind of following through, where most leaders will try to grab their own weapons of warfare and we'll create our own plans. David, because he wanted to be a warrior that was a heart after God, he didn't come after these big plans and he didn't come after these big weapons of warfare. I don't know if you remember this last week. I showed you this picture. I said, if I was David and I had to fight a 9'6" giant that had 165 pounds of armor on his body and a 15-pound spear, I would want to go with this, right? Showed that right there. That's what I would want, right? But David went with 5 smooth stones. Why? Because it wasn't about the weapons that he had to go after Goliath with. It was the heart and the God that was behind him, right? And so the first thing we said about a warrior's heart was, man, if I'm going to be a warrior for Christ, right, then I have to trust him with everything that I am and know that it's not me. It's not my weapons. It's not the things that I fashion that are going to make me successful. It's the God behind me. Now, the other thing we talked about was, some of us in here go, well, that's good for some people, Matt, but I'm not a warrior. I'm not a person that is at war. And we talked about this last week. Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And you may say, well, I don't have the personality of a warrior. This eliminates me. I don't relate to anything you're talking about. But it's the equivalent of you standing in the middle of a war zone like World War II or Vietnam or the Iraqi conflict, and you stand there and you go, hey, wait, time out. I'm not a warrior kind of person. I'm not the person that likes war. I'm non-confrontational. I'm more of a follower than a leader. Please stop so I can get out of this. And it's not like everybody's going to pull up their guns and go, oh, yeah, she's a little bit shy. Let her go. They're just going to shoot you and move on, right? And as we look at life, you may say in yourself, well, I'm not that warrior kind of personality. I'm kind of laid back. But it does not stop the fight that you have in this world for your kids. It doesn't stop the fight that you have for your marriage. It doesn't stop the fight you have for your integrity. It doesn't stop the fight you have for your character. Because let me tell you something. Satan is going after every single one of those things in your life. And you'll either be ready to fight them with Christ by your side, or you'll stand there and you go, I'm not a warrior, and you're going to get taken down. So what I want to do in the this next one is talk about part 2 of what it looks like to have a warrior's heart. Now, whenever God calls us into war, when he says, hey, you're in one of the biggest battles of your lifetime, the very first thing we start doing is we go, what, who, me, how, when, where, why? I mean, seriously, we start asking all kinds of questions. And I wanted to just let you know that questions are okay. And what we're going to look at today is how do we solve these questions. I was looking for a good illustration of what we were talking about when it comes to questions. And I think questions start from the moment we're little with God to the moment we get ready to meet God. And I was looking at this. These are questions that little kids ask God or their parents about God and what their responses were. One kid says, why does God make mosquitoes? All they do is bite you. And why would they do that? Or why would God do that? Here's one. The little boy asked Jesus, did Jesus get potty trained as fast as I did? Another one said, this is my favorite one, how did Jesus even rise from the grave? Did he punch out of the grave and say, this isn't the last of Jesus? I like that one. That was pretty good. She said, I teach preschool every Sunday, and I talked about Jesus and the Good Shepherd and how he will leave the 99 sheep to find the lost one. And one little boy popped up. Did Jesus work at the zoo? When my oldest was about 3, we found a baby bird in the yard. I think this is my favorite. We had found a baby bird in the yard that had fallen from its nest. When I went back the next morning, it had died. When I took out the kids to play, I discreetly scooped him up, put him in a bag, and threw him in the trash. We came in, and my son said, Mama, what happened to that baby bird? Trying to skirt the issue, I said, oh, you don't have to worry about him. He's with Jesus now. He lives with him. And she goes, does Jesus live in the trash? Right? So, we all have questions, right? We all have questions, and there's nothing wrong with questions. I think every single one of us at some point in time ask questions. Here's the thing that we have to get past. When the questions have been asked, and we don't get the answer we want, or we get the answer that doesn't sound anything like we thought it would, we have a crossroads we have to hit. If we're going to be a warrior for Christ, if we're going to be a person that stands in the midst of what he wants for us, we have to be willing that no matter the circumstance, no matter the question, we're willing to walk forward. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to take your Bible, turn to the book of Judges. We're going to be in chapter 7, okay? And I want to give you an idea of what's going on in this scripture before we pop into it. There's two groups of people in this story, or in this account. The Israelites, the Midianites. The Israelites had walked away from God, okay? And this is so true in your life as it's true in my life. The moment I choose to say, hey, God, I don't need you. God is not a God that's going to go, oh, yeah, you do. You need me. Come here. I'm going to take care of you. You need me. God's going to go, oh, you think you don't need me? Well, let me go ahead and just pull my protection from you, and let's see how that goes. It's kind of like when you're with your kids, and they're like, I'll do fine on my own. And you're like, okay, knock yourself out. And then you sit there and you kind of watch them go through what they go through. The Israelites had just told God basically they don't need him, because they started following after these prophets called Baal, these different people that were completely opposite of God. And God had pulled his protection from them, and the Midianite group, which is a massive amount of people, would come down every so often when the Israelites got their livestock all together and healthy, when they got their food source completely full, when their houses were completely built, when everything was going well. The Midianites would come in and they would raid the Israelites. They would take everything that they owned and they would take it back to their camp, and whatever they could not take, they would set it on fire and leave the Israelites with nothing. It's like the equivalent of that bully little boy that walks up to the ant pile and kicks it, and then comes back 2 days later when it finally got put back together and kicks it again. I mean, that's basically what the Midianites were doing to the Israelites for 7 straight years. Can you imagine? You would get your house in order. You would get your house rebuilt. You get your food supply stocked up. You would get your horses and your cattle and everything healthy. And here would come the Midianites, and they would just take everything and burn what's left. And it got to the point where the Israelites went, okay, God, you have my attention. Do you ever get there? Where God takes you down to zero and you're like, okay, I give up. I need your protection. I will follow you with my whole heart. And the Israelites said that to God. And God set out to find a leader worthy of taking them back to who they once were. And he lands just like God always does. He didn't go pick the most handsome or the strongest or the biggest. He went and chose a man nobody knew about by the name of Gideon. You may have heard of him. He sells his Bibles in hotels. No, it's a joke. He doesn't. He put, that Gideon Bible. Anyway, I say that to say this. So Gideon, okay, at this time is a farmer. He's a by society standards, he's just the average Joe. Nobody knew who Gideon was. And at the time when God found Gideon, Gideon was hiding food in his wine press so that when the Midianites came, he might be able to hide enough that when they left, he would have enough to survive the winter. Gideon was not a warrior. Gideon did not like war. If he liked war, he'd have been out there with a spear trying to fight off the Midianites to not take his house, right? But that's not that's not Gideon. He was hiding his food from the Midianites. In Judges chapter 6, verse 12, an angel stands before Gideon and says, hey, Gideon, a time has come that God is going to restore the Israelites, and he's chosen you, mighty warrior of valor. And Gideon goes, what? What the heck are you talking about? I am not a mighty warrior of valor. I'm not a mighty man of valor. There's nothing warrior about this person right here. And the angel goes, no, God chose you. And it's kind of like some of you all that are fighting some of your battles in your life right now. You're going, I'm not a warrior. I don't have strength. I don't know that I can handle what I'm about to encounter. And God's going, you can handle it. And you're going, are you sure? And the questions start to come out. Questions are nothing new for God. Think about it. Abraham asked God a question. I'm supposed to be the father of many nations. Are you serious? Mary had a question. You're serious. I'm going to have a baby, but I'm going to stay a virgin. How's that going to work? Right? Jesus, when he was in the garden before he was crucified, God, is there any other way that this can happen? I mean, even Jesus asked questions. There's nothing wrong with questions, right? It's how we handle the questions. So Judges chapter 7, verse 1, I want to tell you how Gideon answered the questions and how it should help you to become a person with a warrior's heart. Judges chapter 7, here we go. Then Gideon and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Herod. Gideon had said, God, you want me to be a warrior? All right, I don't understand this. I don't get this, but if you want me to be a warrior, I'll go be a warrior. And so he sets up his men right in the valley but near Morah, the hill of Morah. And verse 2, then the Lord said to Gideon, Gideon, you're a warrior. I want you to go take down these people. But the people that you have are too many for the Midianites for me to give them into your hand. There's just too many of them. Now, I got to give you a little bit of background on the Midianites. The Midianite armies was 135,000 people. Okay? 135,000 5,000. At the moment in time in which God says to Gideon, hey, you have too many people, Gideon had 22,000 men. Do the math. I put this up here. 22,000 versus 135,000. Does that even look fair? No. What is that when it comes to one for every soldier? Can you put that up there for me? Did I do that for you? Okay, leave that alone then. All right. Make it happen. No, I'm just kidding. So here's Gideon. He's fighting these 22,000 people. God looks at him and goes, hey, you have too many men. I want you to take it, and I want you to just bring that down a little bit. And I can just see Gideon going, are you serious? It's 22,000 to 135,000. How am I going to make this happen? God says, hey, tell every man who's scared they can go ahead and go home. And I can just see Gideon going, okay, who's scared? This is going to go great because everybody's scared, God. I mean, seriously? And 10,000 men are the only people out of 22,000 that remain that are not scared. So all of a sudden, can you imagine, you're the leader, you're a farmer, you have no ability to lead, and you're not a warrior by nature, and all of a sudden God says, cut the number down, and all of a sudden 12,000 people walk. Can you imagine what it's like to be Gideon and watch 12,000 of your army go home? I think if I were him, questions would arise. How in the world are we going to do this, God? Are you serious? 12,000 people just walked away. And God looks at Gideon, who's got a ton of questions, because this is kind of what happens in our lives sometimes. God, I don't understand how I'm going to overcome this disease. I mean, there's so many cells of cancer, and there's just one me. God, I don't know how I'm going to overcome this addiction. I mean, there's one small part of me that wants to overcome it, but it seems like every part of my body's raging to want to use again. God, I don't know how I'm going to fix my marriage because there's so many problems, and there's only one me. And I can just see this playing out in all of your lives in a different, unique way. God, I don't know how I'm supposed to be Christ-like in my office. I'm the only Christian there. God, I don't know how I'm supposed to fix my finances. I have so many debts and I just don't make enough money. And we sit there and we have all these questions for God. And God is not one to make things easy for us. Oh, well, here's the answer. You know why he's not one to make things easy for you? Because if he made things easy for you, would you ever depend upon him? No. And that's exactly what he said to Gideon in Judges. I need these men, these people to depend on me, so cut your army down. And then he looks at it and he goes, you know, Gideon, it's still a little bit large. Okay, at this point in time, it is 10,000 to 135,000 people. That is a small army, right? And God says this. He goes, I want you to send the men to the river, and I want them to take a drink. And those who get down on their hands and knees and they drink, I want you to just tell them to go home. And those who get down and they kind of keep themselves in a position of awareness and readiness, and they scoop the water to their hand and they lap it, I want you to keep them. Now, if I am Gideon, I'm going, oh, please, God, please, make the ones who do this, make it a bunch of them, right? There's 10,000 men. 300 drink the way God told them to drink. Think about that. We are now 300 against 135,000. Look at the math. One Israelite for every 450 Midianites. Does that sound fair? Can you imagine if you're on this warrior team and God says, hey, Larry, I want you to go out and I want you to fight. And you know what? Your job, you only have to take out 450, right? At that point in time, I'd be like, where's the bomb? Right? Because I can't take 450 people down on my own, God, right? This is just not going to happen. And all of a sudden, you got to think, if you're Gideon, and it's 1 to every 450, you start going, God, how in the world am I supposed to make this happen? Did you forget that I'm a farmer? Did you forget I have no warrior abilities? Did you not see how insurmountable this looks for me right now, God? And God goes, no sweat, man. I got the plan for you. I want to read you his plan. Tell me if this would create some questions in your mind. Let's just read from verse 9. I'm sorry, not verse 9. Let's read from verse 19. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him, so Gideon took 300 men, he split them into groups of 100, okay, because that way they'd spread out and look a little bit bigger, right, amongst 135,000 people. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp, and beginning in the middle watch, when they had just set the watch, they blew trumpets and smashed jars. Say what? Let's read that again. So in the middle of the watch, when there's 135,000 men ready to take them out and kill them, God's plan for them was to blow trumpets and smash jars. Would that create some questions in your life? Hey, God, I got a 1 on 450 number thing going on here. There's 300 of us and 135,000 of them, and God says, hey, no sweat, man. We're going to smash jars and blow trumpets. I think if I were him, I'd be like, check, please, I'm done. Would you? Would you be ready to fight this battle? Can I ask you an honest question about your life? Do the battles that you're facing right now feel like that you're trying to smash jars and blow trumpets against an enemy that is so much bigger than you that you can't even handle it right now? Is there a sickness in your family? Is there a tragedy in your family? Is there a divide in your marriage among you and your kids, at your office, that you have no idea, that the odds seem so insurmountable that you have no idea how you're going to overcome this? That it just feels like that you're fighting a battle that you can't win, that you're blowing trumpets and smashing jars? You may be sitting there and going, I don't have a warrior's personality. How am I supposed to do this? God, why in the world would you choose me? Why does this stuff happen to me? Can I just tell you something? Those are okay questions. It's okay to ask that. But here's the deal, and this is what I want you to see about Gideon, and this is where we have to land. Gideon might have asked a lot of questions, and we're going to get to his questions at the very end. But here's what I want you to notice. At the time in which God said, blow trumpets and smash jars, Gideon, without hesitation, after he knew what God's call was on his life, said, okay, if that's what you want from me, God, I'm a farmer and I have no idea how to fight, but if you want me to blow trumpets and smash jars, then blow trumpets and smash jars, we will. So let's read what happened. Here we go. So Gideon, the 100 men who were with him, verse 19, came to the outskirts of the camp, and at the middle watch of the night when they had just, in the middle, I lost my place here. Come on now, Matt. At the outskirts of camp, in the middle watch of the night when they had just set the watch, and they blew the trumpets, smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands these torches, and in their right hands the trumpets they blew, and they cried out, a sword for the Lord and a sword for Gideon. And every man in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. Are you serious? I want you to think about this because I want to read you this next verse. I think it's incredibly important to understand about God. And I think it's incredibly important to understand about your warrior going on. Verse 21. Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried out and they fled, and when they blew the 300 trumpets, listen to this verse. Read it for yourself. The Lord set every man's sword against the other. You see that? I'm trying to picture this in my mind. I'm trying to picture Gideon for just a second, if you will, with me. Go with me for a second. He's going, God, I'm going to trust you, but I don't know how this is going to work. We're going 135,000 people against 300. Okay, on 3, we're going to blow those trumpets. 1, 2, 3. That's kind of what I'd be doing. Oh, dear God, this is not going to go well. And all of a sudden, can you imagine opening your eyes, being Gideon, looking at the crowd and going, they're stabbing one another. It doesn't say that all of a sudden that they just started running and ran into one another. It says that God took their swords and he set them on one another. In other words, they're just stabbing each other and they have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. And 135,000 men take each other out. You know what this means? This means that no matter how big your opposition is in your life right now, no matter how insurmountable what you're facing and going on in your life is right now, that God is bigger than that. That it's not about the weapons of war that you bring to the table. It's not about the plans. It's about you getting past the questioning and just saying, hey, God, I don't understand, but I'm going to obey anyway. Can I tell you something? Your children, your wife, your husband will never know how to truly trust God unless one of you steps up and is the warrior heart in your home and shows the others what it looks like to unquestionably follow God. And when you do that, they will sit back and they'll go, wow, holy smokes, that's amazing. We got a family in our church right now. I won't say their names, but they came to a place in their life where God threw this huge question mark in their life. They both felt like God wanted him, the husband, who had a really good paying job, a great paying job, to quit, completely walk away and quit because they were called to do ministry of some kind of which they had no idea what they were supposed to do. This was April. He was supposed to get a raise or a bonus of $8,000 in June or July, and he quit 2 months to the prior date of receiving the $8,000 check. Why? Because God said to him, I want you to quit your job, I want you to come home with your wife, and I want you to do ministry. And he goes, that doesn't make any sense, God. How am I going to pay my bills? What about this big bonus that's coming up? They came to him when he quit, and they said, hey, we'd like to give you a promotion. And he said, no, God's called me to quit. And they looked at him and they said, are you crazy? He goes, maybe. Right? Maybe, I'm not sure. But here's what he was going to. When God calls us to do something that is bigger than us, and we truly want to see God work in our lives in a mysterious and awesome way, then no matter whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, we say yes. So when God says, hey, I know you're sick, but gather these people around you and pray, then we need to know that God has the ability to heal. When God takes a tragedy in our life, and all of a sudden we have a new normal, and we don't understand the new normal, and God says, trust me. If we trust him, he will take something very broken, and he will make it very right. Here's the question, in your life and in mine. Can we get past the question? Because so many times what happens? God puts this, we get this insurmountable situation in our life, and what do? We go, man, I just don't think I can handle that. Or we go grab the bigger weapon, or we go get the greater plan. And God goes, you don't need a greater plan. I got a plan. Blow the trumpets, smash the jars, and you're like, it doesn't make any sense. I cannot do that, God. And then God says, well, you're going to fail if you don't. It's going to go bad if you don't. Your kids are never going to see victory if you don't. Your family's never going to be whole again if you don't. Your marriage is never going to be fixed again if you don't. Because sometimes it makes zero sense, doesn't it? Well, God, I know you want me to forgive him, but he did so many things to me. I know you want me to forgive her, but she hurt me so bad. How am I supposed to go back to affectionately loving the person that hurt me like that? You just got to trust me. You got to quit questioning and just say yes. Because my plans are greater. Now watch this. Just like last week, my favorite part of the story, verse 25. And they captured the two princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and they killed Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. And then they pursued Midian, and they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon across the Jordan. Just like last week when Goliath was taken down and David sawed off his head, here comes the Israelites again, taking Oreb and Zeb's head, bringing it back to the camp and holding them up high. And here's what they're saying. Man, you know what? We do not question God. We love God. We are going to follow God with our whole heart. And I can see their kids, and I can see their grandkids, and I can see their wives going, man, I am 100% in on God, because look what he did. He took down 135,000 people with a jar and a horn. But do you understand this? So many Christians will never allow their families to see God because they cannot get in their head that God can fix their problems with a horn and a jar. It's got to be a bigger equation than that. No, it's not. A warrior for Christ, here's what they understand. That when the questions come, they may question, but they always say yes. God, I don't know what you want. I don't understand this. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why I'm supposed to forgive that person. I don't know how I'm going to be this light in that dark world. God, I don't know how we're going to take care of this financial issue. But God, I'm not going to question. I'm going to trust and I'm going to follow you. Can I ask you a really hard question? Do you have a story of victory in your family where you trusted God so much that your kids step back and go, God's real, I got no question. Because, man, they trusted him so much. I saw God at work in our family. If that's never happened in your life, can I tell you something? The opportunity for it to happen will come. And when it does, all these questions are going to rise up in your heart. Maybe you're in the middle of it right now. And my challenge to you is to be a warrior, not a wimp, and say yes. God, I got a lot of questions, but you're a huge God, and my answer is yes. Will you do me a favor and bow your head and close your eyes for a second? You may be sitting here right now, right in the middle of the battle. And you have had so many questions, so many things in your life that you've been going, I'm not sure how to handle this. I don't know that I'm the warrior to take this on. I don't know that I'm strong enough. I've come up with all these plans, and none of these plans have worked. And maybe it's time in your life where you stop questioning God and just say yes. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to point yourself out at this point. Here's all I want you to do. Hey, God, I need your help to be a warrior for you. God, I'm not wired that way. God, I'm not sure I have these abilities. But God, if you can take a horn and you can take a jar and you can destroy 135,000 people, then I trust you to fix my problems. I'll lay them in your hands. Some of you that are sitting in here right now with every head bowed and every eye closed, here's my thought for you. For a long time, maybe, God has been saying, hey, I want to be Lord of your life. I want you to give your life to me. And you're going, man, there are so many questions if I do that, God. There are so many people in my life that are going to say, oh, man, are you crazy? Are you one of those Jesus fanatics? And I don't know that I can do that, God. If you did that, here's my question for you. How would it change your life? How would it change your children's lives? What testament, as you held up the head of victory in front of your kids, what would that say? You may be sitting here going, man, it's been a long time. I have fought this. And maybe you're ready to quit fighting right now. And if you need to give your heart to Christ and you want to talk about how to do that, with nobody else looking around, I'm the only one, just lift your hand. Matt, I'd like to have a conversation about that. Lift it up. Father God, I thank you for just honest, transparent hearts. And I pray, God, that as we come to the end of this, that, Father, you would help us to be transparent, that you would help us to be honest, that, God, you would help us to lay everything before you, to admit we question, we're scared, there's anxiety in our lives, but, God, we want to trust you. And so, Father, I pray that you would raise up a room of men and women who have warrior hearts that may have questions, but their answer is always yes. In your name I pray. Amen. Let's stand. Let's stand.